Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I'm sure many of you remember, hopefully you're old enough to be able to remember this if you're watching this channel, but I'm sure many of you remember 2012 and how we were told that the world might be ending. There was this big thing about the world ending in December of 2012. I remember my sister was absolutely terrified of it at the time. I remember thinking it was so stupid, but then even the night of, I was scared. I remember I was a sophomore in college and I was very, very scared going to bed that night. And recently I have been getting a ton of requests to talk about maybe the world could have ended in 2012. And I actually thought about doing this video a while back. I did research for it, kind of looked into it and decided there wasn't really enough to talk about, but recently I found a Twitter thread because so many of you have sent this to me. This was posted by a guy named Nick Hinton, and I thought I would look at the whole theory and see if there's anything to it and if the world could have possibly really ended in 2012. But before we get started, I wanted to let you guys know I have another chill pack giveaway for you guys. There will be 3 winners winning my chill packs, and inside of them are a bunch of different Monk pens and products from Monk, including a Monk R, a bunch of different CBD products from Hemp Bombs, which is the best CBD. I can't recommend it enough. It's legal nationwide. It's amazing. Use the code MILEHIGHER for 20% off. That is a nice chunk off. You'll also be getting my coloring book as well as a $100 credit to my merch shop, which is milehighermerch.com. So it's super awesome and really easy for you to enter. Just go ahead and check out the link below. You don't have to do anything other than be subscribed to my YouTube channels. Everything else is a bonus entry. So, the 2012 phenomenon. Basically, the idea is that some major transformative event was going to happen to the world on December 21st, 2012. And the reason that this was the date was because that's what the Mayan calendar said. And you may have heard this rumor if you remember this whole time. This date is regarded as the end of a 5,126 year cycle in the Mesoamerican long count calendar, otherwise known as the Mayan calendar. And the Mayan calendar is something that repeats every 395 years, but this was not considered a doomsday event for them. This just was like a marker in time. It was an accomplishment getting to this time. And in Mayan culture, even now, they celebrate the end of a calendar, and that date would have been celebrated by the Mayans. The Mayans also believed that we were living in something that they called the fourth creation. In Mayan culture, they believed that the first 3 creations by God were like messed up or something. God trashed them. Done. So the last one, the 4th creation, was the best, and we are currently living in that one. So the end of that time period would be something to celebrate. The last one of these markers was September 16th, 1618, so quite a long time ago. But on that date, nothing happened. The world didn't end. It was just a mark in the calendar. There's actually nothing in Mayan prophecy or their writings that says anything about a major event or the end times happening at the end of the calendar. The whole notion of the great cycle kind of coming to an end is a modern rumor, pretty much. So there were a lot of theories created around the whole idea of the world ending because of the Mayan calendar, and they varied in different, ways that the world would end. Some people made it religious. There was all types of things and rumors. So people were really scared. Some people took it very seriously. My sister literally had to go to therapy as a kid because she was so freaked out by it. NASA actually has this public outreach website called Ask an Astrobiologist, and they actually received over 500 questions from people wondering if it was true and if they should kill themselves, their wives, or their kids, like some crazy stuff. In May of 2012, they did a poll, and they actually found out that 8% of the 16,000 people that they interviewed in over 21 different countries had fear of the world ending in December 2012. The responses were extremely high in China, which was interesting, at 20%, 13% in Russia, Turkey, Japan, and Korea, and 12% in America. There was at least one person who took their own life in fear of the world ending in 2012. There were others reported, but we can't directly link all of those, but I'm sure there was some. In the United States, in 2009, there were actually construction companies that started advertising using seeing the fear of the apocalypse happening, and they advertised to build like underground bunkers for people and bomb shelters. Then there was the solar storm, which is what my sister actually was really afraid of at first, and then she researched it a bunch, and I remember her telling me about it. So when I was looking at this theory, I started looking into this. So obviously the sun is an active star, and that means it goes through cycles of solar activity. And over the course of 11 years, the sun goes from higher activity back down to lower activity. And back in 2012, we just so happened to be in a year where there was a lot of solar activity happening with the sun. And it's totally normal for the sun to put out solar flares. Sometimes they're really small, and sometimes they're a lot larger depending on where in the cycle the sun is. Whenever the sun does put out a solar flare, the Earth's thick atmosphere is able to block the radiation from damaging our planet. These solar flares happen so often that the Earth is usually hit with a flare once or twice a week, and we don't even notice it. Sometimes if they're strong enough, they can affect like satellites orbiting us and cause problems with power grids on Earth. But luckily it takes 2 to 3 days for it to travel to Earth, so we do get some warning time and we're able to prepare for it. In July of 2012, there were some big solar flares, and so people started thinking that is going to be what takes us out in December 2012, and a lot of the forums and gossip started running with it. But even though the idea of a solar flare sounds scary and it could possibly affect like power, there's really no chance of a solar flare taking out the entire planet or like ending life as we know it or the world. So now I'm going to get into Nick Hinton's theory about the world ending in 2012. So he doesn't really talk about the Mayans and stuff. None of that was part of his theory. So the first thing that Nick starts talking about is the Higgs boson particle, which is very, very interesting stuff. One person that has been really well known for talking about this particle is Stephen Hawking. He basically said that there were major potential dangers of this type of particle, and that it could create energy so high that the universe could undergo a catastrophic vacuum decay. And the reason that this all ties into the 2012 theory is that they discovered this particle in 2012. CERN discovered this particle. So this made people think maybe the world really did end in 2012, and we're all living in some type of weird hellscape or something. The Higgs boson is a particle associated with the Higgs field, which is an energy field that transmits mass into the things that travel through it. It's very, very complicated, and I am not a good person to explain this to you, but basically it explains how mass, such as stars, humans, animals, plants, everything came to have mass. The Higgs boson field is something that was formed immediately after the Big Bang, forced particles with mass to slow down in space instead of moving at the speed of light. It's made up of tons of small particles, so since 1964, scientists have been trying to find a way to capture one of those particles, and they were finally successful in July of 2012 at CERN. To create these particles, they basically had to have 2 other particles slam at each other at extreme speeds, and they do that using a machine called the Large Hadron Collider. This is a machine at CERN, which is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. I've talked about CERN on my podcast a few times, and one thing that I find really interesting about CERN that I know I haven't mentioned on this channel is that CERN has this bizarre statue in front of it. This is the god Shiva. It's a gift from India, and this is the creator of life and also the destroyer of life. So it's kind of an interesting thing to have outside of your building, and there's a lot of theories about them having some power to end the world. So this machine that CERN has to create this particle is actually a 17-mile track buried underground. It's outside of Geneva, and it shoots beams of protons at each other. And when they collide, they create super high energy mashups that spew out subatomic particles. And from time to time, Higgs boson is one of those particles. And the reason it's so hard to measure a Higgs boson particle is because as soon as they are formed, they transfer into different particles. This particle actually has the potential to create a man-made black hole. And so a lot of people think that maybe they have created a black hole, and I have touched on that on my channel before. Back in 2012, when they were using that huge collider, maybe they really did make a black hole and they propelled us into an alternate universe, or the world ended. People think that maybe the universe was destroyed, but we moved into an alternate universe, our consciousness, a universe that's pretty much identical but with slight differences, and that's that's when the Mandela effect comes into play. So if you don't know what the Mandela effect is, quick overview. It's named after Nelson Mandela, who is a famous world leader who people thought died way earlier than he actually did, and they remember learning it in school. I was one of them, and so this whole idea became known as a Mandela effect. When you remember something being different than what it actually was. But it's not just you, it has to be like a lot of people remember it that way. You can't just like have a shitty memory and it's a Mandela effect. Here are some examples. The most common one is the Bernstein Bears. A lot of people remember it being Bernstein. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember this. Another one that I found recently that I haven't talked about is Coca-Cola. I actually polled you guys and most of you said number 2 was the correct one. And that's also what I thought, and it turns out it's actually number 1, which is just crazy to me. Okay, so looking at the Febreze logo, the one on the left is actually the correct one. The one on the right is wrong. Okay, how about these 2 boxes of Fruit Loops? Which one is correct? It's actually the fruit with UI in it, the one on the left. So weird. I definitely would have thought it was the right. Okay, and so Nick talks about a Mandela effect of the Statue of Liberty being gone. He says that if you go onto Google Maps and go onto Street View, there's a specific area of Liberty Island where the Statue of Liberty is chopped off. Here is a picture that he posted of it. So after going on the Street View myself, there are plenty of cameras that show the statue. However, I was able to find the one that has it cut off, and I think it's really just some type of glitch on Google Maps or something blocking the camera, like a blind spot. Because when you look at any of the other cameras on that area, you can actually see it just fine. So then Nick talks about something called the Black Tom incident, which a lot of you probably don't know about, which is crazy. But basically, right before the United States entered World War I, the Germans committed the first act of terrorism on US soil, and it was considered one of the largest artificial non-nuclear explosions that we have ever encountered. It was on July 30th, 1916 in New York Harbor. It damaged the Statue of Liberty as well as ruined about $22 million worth of military goods. Why don't we talk about this in history? I have no idea. Our history is so washed over, it's insane. But secondly, before this event occurred, you were able to walk inside of the tower of the Statue of Liberty at the actual torch part. Sorry, I keep like bumping my water around. However, after this attack, the government closed that down and you cannot go inside. Even though it's been closed 100 years and anyone that would have gone inside of it would be dead by now, there are still people that remember going inside of it and claim that it's some type of weird parallel universe where they were able to go inside. Check out this review from a lady who said that she went in the torch. She said, "When I visited there as a teen, you could climb right up into the torch," which I did, of course, and looked out. It was quite a thrill. There's more people talking about it. It's actually quite beautiful. I even went all the way up to the torch on the Statue of Liberty. I saw Ground Zero's remains. I mean, there's tons of people talking about it, but are they all telling the truth? Nick even argues that there are pictures of people posting from inside of the torch, and he posted some pictures as proof. But after doing a little bit of research, I found out that there are webcams in the torch, and you can access them at any time. Any of you can look right now, link it below. And those pictures are clearly just screenshots from the webcam. Nick also brings up the fact that a lot of people remember the Statue of Liberty being on Ellis Island. I actually don't remember ever learning that, but I do remember clearly learning that when people came in on the boats, they saw the Statue of Liberty as they were coming into Ellis Island. They like went past it. I think a lot of people are just confused about that one. But let me know if you were taught that the Statue of Liberty is on Ellis Island. So another thing that Nick talks about in the Twitter feed is a guy named Terrence McKenna, who is a super interesting dude. He's really into trippy topics, and he's a major advocate for plant-based psychedelics being used as medicine. He doesn't straight up believe that the world was going to end in 2012, but he did predict that there would be some type of reality rearranging event in 2012. And he made this prediction using something called a time wave zero formula. And this decodes something called the King-Wen sequence and creates a graph that shows a pattern in history. And as you can see in the graph at 2012, it drops to nearly 0. So does that mean something major happened to the world? Next in the thread, he talks about a guy named Preston Nichols, and he is actually a whistleblower whistleblower who wrote books about various experiments at Montauk Air Force Base, which is super creepy, and maybe I should do a whole video on it. I know I've talked about that on my podcast before and stuff, but maybe it's time for a video on the Montauk Project. In one of his books, Preston claims that they were conducting experiments on time travel and were never able to time travel past the year 2012 because they weren't able to find a future after it. Apparently in the book, he said that after 2012, there's basically a big wall and you can't go forward in time. So anyway, I think this theory is really interesting. I don't know if I think the world actually ended in 2012, but I definitely am not completely opposed to the idea that we're living in a parallel universe. I mean, anything is possible. Some of the stuff that they're working on at CERN is unbelievable and honestly scares me to my core. I want to know what you guys think though, so let me know in the comments below. Do you think that the world could have ended in 2012, or do you think that it's all just a bunch of BS? That's it for me today, guys. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you next time.